A paralyzed billionaire, abandoned mid-date, thought his story was over. Then a child's innocent question cracked open a miracle. The steam rising from Jeff Gomez's coffee was the only thing moving at his table. He hadn't touched it. Couldn't. Not with the silence pressing in like a weight. Not with the stares. The ones pretending not to be stares, brushing against him like cold wind. She was gone. Just like that. The woman he'd waited weeks to meet. The one who'd flirted over text and called his voice warm. Had walked in, seen the wheelchair, and within minutes, politely smiled, lied about an emergency, and left. Jeff swallowed hard. The bitterness wasn't from the coffee. It was from the silence that came after. The same kind of silence he remembered from that night. The night everything crashed. Screeching tires. Crushed steel. Then stillness. In one moment, he had gone from being the CEO of one of the most powerful tech empires in the country to a man who needed help getting in and out of bed. He remembered the way board members had shifted their eyes after the accident, how friends had stopped calling, how even his own brother had said, "It's just hard seeing you like this." And now this date, a woman who couldn't even sit through one coffee without running. He should leave. He should roll right out the door and back into the quiet apartment that didn't care whether he could walk or not. But something, pride, stubbornness, God, kept him there. Then, through the low hum of cafe chatter, came a child's voice. Loud, innocent, unfiltered. "Mommy, why is that man sitting all alone?" He looked sad. Jeff turned. "Before we continue, if this story already has your heart stirring even just a little, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more faith-filled stories like this, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to know. Now let's dive right back into the story. A little boy with big eyes and wild curls stood near the counter, tugging on his mom's hand. She was tired-looking but pretty, with the kind of face that hadn't let life make her hard. She looked embarrassed, like she wanted the ground to open up and swallow her whole. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, pulling her son close. Jeff let out a half-laugh, the first real sound from him all morning. "Don't be," he said. "He's right. I am sitting alone." The boy smiled. "Can we sit with you?" The mother froze. Her hand still gripped the boy's. Jeff could see the hesitation in her eyes. Not pity, not fear, just uncertainty. "I don't bite," he added, "but the coffee might." Her mouth quirked at that. Then slowly, she pulled out the chair across from him. She had no idea, not yet, that this simple act of kindness, this moment of grace, would start something neither of them could walk away from. And maybe, just maybe, God wasn't done writing his story yet. The chair across from Jeff creaked as Amber sat down, her fingers tightening around the paper cup of hot chocolate she'd just picked up for her son. "I'm sorry about what he said," she said softly, brushing a crumb off the table. "He doesn't mean to be rude. He's just 6. Malachi had already taken the seat next to Jeff, swinging his legs and sipping loudly through his straw. Jeff shook his head, lips tugging into a faint smile. "It's refreshing, actually. People usually avoid saying what they're thinking. He just puts it out there." Amber glanced at him, eyebrows raised slightly, as if trying to figure out if he meant it. "Is it okay if we stay?" she asked. "I'd like that," Jeff said, and he meant it more than he thought possible. The conversation trickled slowly at first, like warm rain after a drought. Malachi led the way, unafraid and full of questions. "Do you drive that chair like a car? What do you do for work? What's your favorite color?" Jeff answered them all with a smile, chuckling when Malachi guessed he was a secret agent. "Close," Jeff said. "I'm in business." Amber sipped her coffee, watching him carefully. "What kind of business?" Jeff paused, choosing his words. He didn't want to be Jeff Gomez, billionaire and founder of Gomez Enterprises today. He just wanted to be Jeff, a man having coffee. "Oh, tech stuff," he said casually. "Mostly boring." Amber nodded, accepting the vague answer. "Well, it must have kept you busy." He shrugged. "Not so much lately." The conversation turned. Amber shared about her nursing shifts, the late nights, the early mornings, and how Malachi was born with a heart defect. "His father couldn't handle it," she said, stirring her coffee slowly. "He left when Malachi was 3. It's been just us since." Jeff watched her. The way her voice trembled for half a second, then steadied like she'd done this 1,000 times before. There was no bitterness, just quiet strength. She wasn't telling the story for sympathy. She was just living it. Something in Jeff's chest ached. "I'm sorry," he said. Amber smiled faintly. "God's carried us through. I've learned he doesn't promise easy, just that we won't walk alone." Jeff looked down at his hands, remembering the dark nights when he questioned if God had forgotten him altogether. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe he just spoke through 6-year-olds and women who'd been to hell and back. When they stood to leave, Malachi wrapped his small arms around Jeff's neck. "Don't be sad next time," he whispered. Jeff's throat tightened. He blinked fast and nodded. As they walked away, something warm, something he hadn't felt in years, stirred in his soul. For the first time in forever, he wasn't sad. Jeff hadn't been back to the cafe since that morning, but something pulled him there now. It was the same table, the same untouched coffee. Only this time, he was waiting, hoping. His wheelchair faced the door, pretending not to watch it, but his heart had other plans. Maybe they won't come. Maybe it was just one of those God-orchestrated, one-time miracles. He'd just begun to tell himself it was silly to hope like this, when the bell above the door jingled. And there they were, Amber in her nurse's scrubs, hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, and Malachi, all sunshine and sneakers, spotted him instantly. "Jeff!" the boy shouted, darting across the cafe like a rocket. Jeff felt a breath rush out of him in surprise and something dangerously close to joy. Malachi leaped onto the seat beside him without hesitation, like they'd been meeting here for years. Amber followed slower, smiling, but with tired eyes. "I wasn't sure you'd be back," she said, setting her bag down. "I wasn't either," Jeff replied, "but I guess I was hoping you might be." She looked at him a moment, then nodded. "Us too." They talked over cocoa and coffee again. This time, it wasn't just surface level. It was real. Amber shared how she was juggling double shifts to keep up with hospital bills. Malachi had a heart checkup coming up next week. Routine, but still nerve-wracking, she said, brushing a crumb from her scrub top. Jeff listened carefully. Every detail settled into him, like seeds in soil he hadn't realized was still fertile. He laughed when Malachi made dinosaur noises. He asked Amber questions, real ones, about her job, her hopes, her fears. And for the first time in a long time, Jeff wasn't just sitting in a chair. He was present. He was alive. When it came time to leave, Jeff noticed Amber quietly pulling coins from a small change pouch. She was counting them under the table, trying to be discreet, but he saw the way her fingers shook. It broke something in him. Without a word, Jeff wheeled himself up to the counter and tapped his card. "Add theirs to mine," he said to the barista. "Please don't say anything." The barista nodded, but Amber noticed. She didn't say a word until they were out the door. Then she turned back. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice thick. "But you didn't have to." "I know," Jeff replied. "I wanted to." Amber nodded once, pride, gratitude, and unspoken understanding all tangled in her gaze. As they disappeared down the sidewalk, Jeff sat there longer than he meant to. The warmth from their presence still lingered like a gentle echo. He didn't want to help them out of pity. He just wanted to see them again, because with them, he felt something he thought was gone. He felt like a man again. The cafe smelled like cinnamon and rain that afternoon. Jeff sat at their usual table, fingers tapping anxiously against his cup. He knew she'd be upset, but he also knew he had to try. He'd called Dr. Marcus Levine the day before. Old friend, one of the country's top pediatric cardiologists. One favor and the appointment was set. No billing, no waiting. Malachi deserved the best. When the door swung open, Amber's eyes found him instantly. She didn't smile. She walked straight to the table, sat down hard, and folded her arms. "I got a call from some fancy clinic this morning," she said, her voice tight. "They said you arranged it, that you're covering everything." Jeff opened his mouth, but she cut him off. "You can't fix everything with money, Jeff." He leaned forward, calm but firm. "Not everything, but maybe this one thing." Her eyes flashed. "You don't understand. I've had to be strong for so long. I don't get to just lean on people." "I get that," Jeff said quietly. "More than you know." She laughed bitterly, brushing at her cheek as if trying to wipe away more than just a tear. "You don't. You don't know what it's like to have people look at you and only see what you need from them." Jeff held her gaze. "Actually, I do." Silence. Then he said, softer now, "After my accident, people didn't see me anymore. They saw a chair, a burden, something broken. I stopped asking for help because I couldn't take the pity, couldn't take being handled." Amber blinked, tears welling up again. "So you shut people out." "Exactly," he said. "Maybe we both forgot how to let someone help." She looked down, lips trembling. "It's not about the money, Jeff. I'm scared. Scared to trust someone. Scared of depending on anyone again." Jeff reached out, resting his hand on the table between them. "I'm not asking you to depend on me. I'm asking to stand with you. Just this once. As a friend. As someone who cares." Her eyes met his. Slowly, the wall began to crack. "All right," she whispered. "But this isn't charity." "No," he said gently. "It's partnership." She nodded, wiping a tear away. "Okay." Jeff exhaled, something peaceful settling over them both. Amber smiled faintly. "You're full of surprises." Jeff grinned. "You have no idea." As they sat there, cups cooling and hearts softening, a quiet knowing passed between them. This wasn't just about help anymore. This was grace. And for the first time, neither of them felt so alone in the world. The walls of the hospital waiting room were too white, too quiet. Even the soft buzz of the vending machine sounded too loud against the tension wrapping Amber's shoulders like chains. She sat stiffly, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. She couldn't look at the clock again. Each second stretched like an hour. Beside her, Jeff sat in silence. No small talk. No awkward attempts to fill the air. Just presence. Steady. Unmoving. There. Amber had no idea how long they sat like that, maybe hours. Maybe lifetimes. Her heart warred between faith and fear. She whispered 100 prayers under her breath, her lips barely moving. "Lord, just hold him. Please hold my baby." Finally, footsteps. She stood before she even knew she had. A doctor in scrubs rounded the corner, peeling off his gloves with a smile that shattered the dam inside her. "Amber Robinson?" "Yes," she gasped, stepping forward, heart pounding. The doctor's smile widened. "He's perfect. The surgery went beautifully. He's stable, and he asked for you." Amber's knees buckled, and Jeff was there, catching her elbow as she sank into the nearest chair. Her face crumpled in relief, sobs tearing from somewhere deep. She didn't care who saw. Her boy was okay. Thank you, Jesus, she breathed, over and over. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Jeff didn't say anything. He just sat beside her, his hand resting lightly over hers. Later, when she was finally allowed into Malachi's recovery room, the soft beep of monitors was the most beautiful sound she'd ever heard. He was small under the sheets, pale but smiling. His eyelids fluttered open slowly. When he saw her, his face lit up weakly, and then his gaze drifted to Jeff, who'd wheeled himself just inside the doorway. You came back, Malachi whispered. Jeff smiled, voice quiet and steady. I said I would, didn't I? Amber bit her lip, tears pooling again. Not from fear this time, from something else. She watched as Jeff gently reached out and gave Malachi a thumbs up. The boy returned it with a sleepy grin before drifting off again. Amber sat at her son's bedside, but her eyes kept returning to Jeff. He hadn't needed to be here. He had no obligation, and yet he came, and stayed. In that moment, she realized something she hadn't dared admit until now. She wasn't facing this life alone anymore. That night, long after the nurses dimmed the lights and Amber dozed off with her hand resting on Malachi's, Jeff wheeled himself out into the cool night air. He looked up at the stars, tiny lights scattered across a vast, dark sky. And for the first time since the accident, he felt it. Hope. The weeks after the surgery blurred into something close to beautiful. Jeff found himself at the hospital more often than at home. He read where the wild things are to Malachi, 6 times in 1 week. He brought takeout after Amber's shifts, always remembering her favorite, Thai with extra peanut sauce. And he had somehow become the only person who could make her laugh even when her feet ached and her patience wore thin. Malachi had started calling him Uncle Jeff, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Jeff never corrected him. One Saturday, as Amber packed Malachi's overnight bag for a weekend with her aunt, Jeff found himself pacing the echoing halls of his penthouse. The space was sleek, spotless, soulless, floor-to-ceiling windows, modern art, not a picture frame in sight. It felt like success and loneliness. So he picked up the phone. Hey, he said, how about coming over tomorrow? Just to relax. I'll cook. You cook. Amber teased on the other end. He grinned. Technically, my chef cooks, but I'll take credit. She agreed. That Sunday, laughter echoed through rooms that hadn't heard it in years. Malachi zoomed around in Jeff's wheelchair, giggling. Jeff chased him at a crawling pace, pretending to lose. Amber sat on the couch, watching them, a soft smile tugging at her lips. Jeff was different here, lighter, warmer, the armor gone. Not the sharp-suited CEO the press used to stalk. This Jeff was kind, funny, gentle. When Jeff offered her a cup of tea later, she noticed how his hand shook slightly, not from weakness, but from vulnerability. Thank you, she said, fingers brushing his as she took the cup. They sat side by side, Malachi asleep in the guest room, the apartment quieter now. I don't think I've heard him laugh like that in ever, Amber whispered. Jeff looked at her. It's a good sound. She nodded, then hesitated. Her smile faded just slightly. This is nice, she said, but it's not real life, Jeff. People leave. That's what they do. Jeff's jaw tightened. He wanted to say he wouldn't, that he was different, but he knew words weren't enough. So he said what mattered. I'm not trying to be anyone else, Amber. Just me. Right here. She looked away, hiding the storm behind her eyes. When they left that evening, Malachi hugged Jeff around the neck, whispering, Best day ever. Amber kissed Jeff lightly on the cheek and paused. Thank you, she said, voice low, for all of it. Jeff watched them step into the elevator. The door slid shut, and it hit him a slow, aching truth. Somewhere between bedtime stories and quiet cups of tea, They had already taken his heart with them. The envelope sat on the kitchen table like a thread. Amber stared at the red print stamped across the top. Final notice. The insurance had only covered a portion of Malachi's surgery. The rest, thousands, now fell squarely on her. Her breath caught. She folded the paper, tucked it under a pile of old magazines, and swallowed the rising panic. Not again. I'll figure it out. I always do. But the weariness was different now. Deeper. It pressed on her ribs like a weight, even when she smiled through it. She never told Jeff. Not after everything. Not after how much he'd already done. But word travels. Especially when one of your best friends is a hospital administrator. Jeff found out 3 days later. He didn't call. Didn't ask. He just paid the balance. Quietly. Anonymously. But Amber wasn't stupid. She stormed into the cafe the next morning. The same one where it had all started. Her cheeks were flushed. Her fists clenched around the receipt she'd found tucked in her mailbox. He looked up, coffee halfway to his lips. You had no right, she snapped, voice trembling. Jeff set the cup down. Amber, why can't you let me stand on my own? She whispered fiercely, eyes brimming. Jeff didn't flinch. Because when you fall, his voice cracked. I fall too. She stared at him, at the man who had slipped into her life like grace on a rainy day. The anger on her face began to melt, slowly, like frost in morning light. It's not just the money, she said, her voice quiet and raw. It's everything. You made me feel safe, Jeff, and that terrifies me. He wheeled forward slightly, closing the space between them. Then let me keep terrifying you. Amber laughed, a broken, tearful sound, and shook her head, biting her lip. You don't play fair. No, Jeff said softly. I don't. Not when it comes to you. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was holy, weighty, a pause carved by heaven. Amber took a breath, stepped closer. Her fingers brushed the side of his face, hesitant at first, then firmer, as if she'd finally allowed herself to reach for what she wanted. Jeff looked up at her, and in that moment, every wall they had built, fear, pride, pain, all crumbled. Their first kiss wasn't perfect. It wasn't practiced or planned. It was soft, trembling, inevitable. When they pulled back, Amber kept her forehead against his. I don't know where this is going. Jeff's hand found hers. I don't either. But I'm not going anywhere. Outside, the world carried on. Inside, something sacred had begun. The sunlight poured through the stained glass windows of New Hope Community Church, casting warm blues and golds across the pews. Jeff sat between Amber and Malachi. The boy curled against his side, humming softly during the final hymn. It wasn't the kind of place Jeff had ever imagined himself, yet it felt like exactly where he belonged. Malachi's recovery was going better than the doctors predicted. Amber was smiling more, sleeping more. And Jeff, he was learning how to breathe again. Not just exist, but live. He'd started coming to Sunday service, joined them for Wednesday night dinners, played board games at Amber's kitchen table until midnight, watched cartoons with Malachi on the floor, laughing harder than the kid. Something was changing in him. Slowly, quietly, like grace sneaking in through a cracked window. One night, after a simple dinner of spaghetti and garlic bread, Jeff lingered at the table while Malachi snored softly on the couch, blanket kicked halfway off. Amber poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from him. Jeff stared into his cup for a long time before he spoke. I never told you the whole story. Amber looked up, waiting. My accident wasn't just bad luck, he said quietly. It was after a fight with my fiancée. We were arguing about the company, about my workaholism. She said I didn't know how to love anyone but myself. His throat tightened. She was right, and when the crash happened, she didn't even come to the hospital. just disappeared. Amber's eyes softened. She reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. I didn't just lose my legs that day, Jeff continued. I lost who I thought I was. A man who could lead, who could be loved. I stopped believing anyone would ever see me as whole again. Silence. Then Amber leaned closer, voice gentle but sure. Maybe God didn't take your legs, Jeff. Maybe he gave you new ones to stand on: love, purpose, and grace. His eyes filled. He wanted to believe that, desperately. Just then his phone buzzed. A message from a board member. Need you on damage control. Scandals breaking. Media will be all over you tomorrow. Jeff closed his eyes. Amber watched him, then said quietly, You're more than your company now. Don't let it take you back to who you were. He opened his eyes. Her words rooted in him, like truth spoken straight from heaven. I want to believe that, he whispered. Then let's pray, she said softly. Together. Jeff hesitated. It had been so long. He didn't know the words anymore. But Amber reached for his hands and bowed her head. He followed, and in that quiet moment, with his past trembling behind him and his future unfolding ahead, Jeff prayed. Not perfectly, not eloquently, but honestly. God, thank you. For them. For this second chance. For not giving up on me, even when I did. The penthouse didn't echo anymore. Where silence once reigned, laughter now spilled down the hallway. Toys dotted the hardwood floors like wildflowers. A tiny sneaker sat beside Jeff's custom wheelchair. Amber scrubs hung by the door, next to a drawing from Malachi that read in bold crayon letters, I love you, Uncle Jeff. Only now, Jeff was more than that. He was theirs. Dinner smelled like garlic bread again, Malachi's favorite, and Amber hummed in the kitchen while Jeff set the table. This version of his life wasn't the one he'd built with ambition and boardrooms. It was better. It was real. That Saturday, Jeff asked Amber to meet him at the cafe. Their cafe. Amber walked in, holding Malachi's hand. The bell above the door chimed just like it had that first awkward morning. But everything was different now. Jeff waited at the same corner table, a soft smile on his face, nerves humming under his skin. His heart pounded louder than the traffic outside. Amber sat across from him, glancing curiously at the single rose on the table. Jeff reached into his coat pocket, and slowly, he rolled back from the table. The chair squeaked softly as he positioned himself in front of her, eye level, heart wide open. Then, with a breath that shook the corners of his soul, Jeff took a small velvet box from his lap and opened it. Amber, he began, voice thick with emotion. I may never walk again, but I will spend the rest of my life standing by you. Amber's hand flew to her mouth, eyes flooding instantly. Malachi gasped, then grinned, already bouncing in place beside her. You were the miracle I never saw coming, Jeff continued. You and Malachi gave me a reason to live again. You didn't just love me as I am, you showed me I was never broken to begin with. He looked up at her, tears shining in his eyes. Will you marry me? Amber dropped to her knees, her own version of yes, and threw her arms around him. Yes, she whispered into his neck. 1,000 times yes. Malachi squealed, wrapping his arms around both of them. We're family. The entire cafe clapped, some wiping away tears. Later, as they sat together, one small family in a crowded world, Jeff looked out the window, then into their faces. His voice, gentle and steady, echoed in his heart. I thought my life ended the day I couldn't stand. But maybe that was the day God taught me how to kneel, to love, to serve, to be seen again. And in that quiet corner, where his shame once lived, love reigned instead. Not perfect, but holy.
If this story reminded you that God can bring beauty out of brokenness, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this with someone who needs hope today. Subscribe for more stories like this, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. You never know who your words might encourage.